You look at the sky. There are no clouds. The blue is pale and empty. It has not rained in 30 days. The local reservoir is a cracked mud pit. The municipal pipes buried under your street are completely dry. You walk into your garage and you check your emergency water storage. You have exactly 6 plastic jugs left on the shelf. You do the brutal survival math in your head. That is 6 days of life for your family. If you ration it, maybe you stretch it to 8 days. But on the 9th day, the biological clock runs out. The panic sets in. You think you're trapped in a zero-precipitation death spiral. You look at the bone-dry dirt in your backyard and you calculate exactly how long it takes for the human body to shut down from total dehydration. 3 days, 72 hours without a drop. Your organs begin to fail. Your cognitive functions collapse. You're looking at the ground. You're looking at the sky. You're waiting for a storm that is not coming. But you're completely ignoring the massive, invisible ocean that is sitting right in front of your face. Right now, even in the middle of a devastating regional drought, there are thousands of gallons of pure, distilled drinking water floating in the air around your home. You just do not know how to catch it. They sold you bottled water. They sold you municipal dependency. They sold you plastic rain barrels that sit completely empty and useless when the weather refuses to cooperate. They never taught you the actuarial physics of condensation. When the power grid collapses, the municipal water stops pumping. The giant concrete water towers that feed your neighborhood rely on massive electric pumps to fight gravity. When the electricity dies, the pressure drops to 0. The taps run dry in 48 hours. When the mega drought hits, the local rivers turn into toxic, stagnant sludge filled with agricultural runoff and desperate, diseased animals. You are left with 2 options. You can sit in your house and wait for the government water trucks that are never coming, or you can step outside and engineer your own localized water cycle. Most modern preppers buy rain barrels and pray for a storm. Rain barrels are a bet against the weather. We do not gamble with our hydration. We do not hope for precipitation. We extract it from the atmosphere by force. Today, we are looking at the atmospheric harvesting engine, a $12 setup made of woven mesh, raw gravity, and basic thermodynamics that pulls literal liters of drinking water out of thin air every single night without a single drop of rain. This is not magic. This is not some theoretical internet trick to get clicks. This is proven, large-scale survival engineering that has kept human beings alive in the most hostile environments on the planet. In the coastal Atacama desert of Chile, there are regions where it has not rained a single drop in recorded human history. It is mathematically the driest place on the surface of the earth. The dirt is dead. The sky is empty. Yet people live there. They grow crops there. They survive without a single deep well or a single municipal pipe. In the arid mountains of Morocco, entire villages pull their daily drinking water out of the morning fog. They do not use expensive commercial machines. They use fog catchers and dew harvesters. They exploit the temperature differential between the night air and the physical earth. The concept is brutal and simple. Air holds moisture. Warm air holds significantly more moisture than cold air. During the heat of the day, the atmosphere acts like an invisible sponge, soaking up water vapor from miles around. When the sun goes down, the ambient temperature drops rapidly. The air literally shrinks. It can no longer hold the immense volume of water vapor it absorbed during the day. That vapor has to go somewhere. It reaches a threshold called the dew point. It frantically looks for a physical surface to condense on. In nature, it forms microscopic dewdrops on the morning grass or the leaves of trees. In survival architecture, we do not leave this to chance. We give the atmosphere a highly optimized, engineered surface area to crash into. A $3,000 commercial atmospheric water generator uses electricity, toxic refrigerants, and loud metal compressors to force this exact process to happen inside a plastic box. You do not have $3,000. In a grid-down scenario, you will absolutely not have the electricity required to run a massive compressor. But you have $12, you have scrap materials in your garage, you have gravity, and you have the undeniable laws of thermodynamics working in your favor. Quick pause. Mid-roll. If this is the kind of raw, unfiltered actuarial data you think more people need to hear, hit the subscribe button. The algorithm suppresses this type of reality because it cannot be monetized by the billion-dollar bottled water industry or the commercial survival gear corporations. We break down the permanent zero-dependency strategies the mainstream will not touch. Back to the data. A critical operational warning before we begin the build protocol. What you're about to see is emergency, grid-down infrastructure. This is for educational purposes and absolute worst-case survival scenarios. While atmospheric water is essentially distilled by nature and mathematically pure when it forms, the mesh screen and the collection trough must be kept perfectly clean to prevent biological contamination. Bird droppings, airborne dust, and insects can foul the collection matrix. In a true collapse, standard protocol dictates that water collected from any open-air surface should still be boiled or run through a biological slow sand filter if your fuel and resources permit. Do your own research. Know your environment. Never blindly trust an open water source. Here's exactly how you build the atmospheric harvesting engine in your own backyard before the rationing begins and the panic sets in. You need to understand the physics of aerodynamic drag before you buy a single piece of material. The biggest mistake amateur preppers make when trying to harvest morning dew is using solid plastic tarps. They string up a massive blue plastic sheet between two trees and they wait for the water to collect. They wake up the next morning and the plastic is completely dry. They fail because they do not understand fluid dynamics. A solid sheet of plastic creates a massive wall of aerodynamic pressure. When the humid night wind blows toward the plastic, the air hits that wall of pressure and simply blows around it, over it, and under it. The microscopic water droplets never actually touch the plastic. The moisture is carried away by the diverted wind. To catch the water, you must let the wind pass through. You need a porous barrier. You need mesh. Specifically, you need high-density polyethylene shade cloth, fine nylon netting, or standard fiberglass window screen mesh. This material costs pennies per square foot at any local hardware store. The mesh works because it eliminates the aerodynamic pressure wall. The wind blows directly through the millions of tiny holes in the fabric, but the microscopic water droplets, suspended in that humid air crash, violently into the individual woven fibers. You need 3 distinct structural components to build this engine: the surface area, the structural frame, and the collection matrix. First, the surface area. Go to the hardware store and buy a large roll of standard fiberglass insect screen or agricultural shade cloth. Shade cloth rated at 30 to 40% coverage is mathematically ideal. You want a piece that is roughly 10 feet wide and 10 feet tall. 100 square feet of vertical harvesting space. This is your invisible sail. This is the net that will trap the ocean floating in your backyard. Second, the structural frame. You must elevate this mesh off the ground. Dew forms best when there is unrestricted airflow. If you put the mesh too close to the dirt, you lose the wind velocity required to push the moisture into the fibers. Build a simple, robust rectangular frame out of scrap wood, 2x4 lumber, heavy-duty polyvinyl chloride pipe, or thick bamboo. Drive 2 vertical heavy posts deep into the ground. Space them 10 feet apart. You want these vertical posts to stand at least 6 feet tall, preferably 8 feet if your local zoning allows it in a pre-collapse scenario. Attach a horizontal crossbar at the very top, connecting the 2 vertical posts. Attach another horizontal crossbar at the bottom, about 2 feet off the ground. Now, stretch your mesh screen tightly across this wooden frame. Secure it with heavy staples, zip ties, or weather-resistant wire. It must be absolutely taut. Think of the surface of a drum. If the mesh is loose, if it flaps and billows in the wind, the kinetic energy of the shaking fabric will physically violently throw the microscopic water droplets off the fibers before gravity has a chance to pull them down into your collection system. A flapping sail is a useless sail. Stretch it tight. Make it rigid. The orientation of this frame is absolutely critical to the survival math. You cannot just place it anywhere and hope for the best. You must position this vertical structure completely perpendicular to the prevailing nighttime winds in your specific geographic location. You need to become a student of your own microclimate. Go outside at 2 in the morning. Wet your finger. Feel the breeze. If the cool, humid night wind constantly blows from the west, the flat, broad side of your mesh screen must face directly west. You want the atmosphere to forcefully push the night air directly into the intersecting fibers of your net. If you set it parallel to the wind, the air will just slide past it, and you will harvest absolutely nothing. Third, you must construct the collection matrix. When the invisible water vapor crashes into the mesh, it condenses into tiny, visible droplets. As the wind continues to blow, more vapor crashes into those droplets. They grow larger. When enough tiny droplets combine, they hit a critical mass where their physical weight overcomes the surface tension holding them to the plastic fiber. Gravity takes over. They begin to roll down the microscopic threads of the screen, gathering more water as they fall, like a snowball rolling down a mountain. You need a highly efficient way to catch this cascading sheet of water before it hits the useless dirt below. Take a long piece of smooth polyvinyl chloride pipe, roughly 4 inches in diameter. A standard residential aluminum or plastic rain gutter will also work perfectly. Cut a slit down the entire length of the pipe if you are using one. Slide this slotted pipe or open gutter directly under the very bottom edge of your taut mesh screen. The bottom edge of the net should literally sit inside the trough. You must angle this horizontal collection pipe slightly downward. One end must be physically lower than the other. Water seeks its own level. Gravity will pull the harvested water out of the mesh into the plastic trough and send it running down the slight slope toward the lowest point. Place a clean, sterilized food-grade plastic bucket directly under the lower end of the angled pipe. Cover the top opening of the bucket with a small, tightly secured piece of clean cloth or fine metal screen. This cover is vital. It keeps thirsty insects, falling leaves, and debris out of your clean drinking water while leaving just enough porous room for the distilled drops to fall freely into the reservoir. That is the entire physical build. You just spent $12. You just used a few pieces of scrap wood and some cheap window screen to build a zero-power distillation engine that will outlast the apocalypse, outlast the supply chain, and outlast the fragile municipal water towers that society blindly worships. Let us look at the actuarial survival math. How much water will this primitive structure actually produce? It depends entirely on your local relative humidity, the temperature differential between day and night, and the total square footage of your mesh surface area. In extremely high fog environments, like the coastal mountains of Chile or the valleys of Morocco, a single large net can produce hundreds of liters of water in a single 24-hour period. That is enough to sustain entire agricultural operations. But we are planning for the worst case scenario. We are planning for a standard, dry suburban backyard during a municipal shutoff. Even with average to low nighttime humidity, a 10-foot by 10-foot mesh screen can yield anywhere from 1 to 3 liters of mathematically pure water every single morning. 1 liter of water is the absolute baseline survival minimum for a resting human being in a temperate climate. It will keep your organs functioning. It will prevent the death spiral. 3 liters keeps a human being highly functional, allowing for physical exertion and thermoregulation. By spending $36 and building 3 of these sails in your backyard, spacing them out so they do not block the wind from each other, you have mathematically secured the hydration baseline for your entire family in a total zero precipitation environment. You have beaten the drought, you have beaten the grid. This system works silently while you sleep. You do not have to pedal a generator. You do not have to burn precious firewood to boil toxic swamp water. You do not have to stand guard over it. You deploy it at dusk. You go to sleep. You wake up at dawn. You walk out to your backyard, and there's a bucket containing clear, cold, life-saving drinking water. There are no moving metal parts. There is nothing mechanical to break. There is no fragile filter membrane to clog with algae and microscopic mud. But there is one rigid operational rule you must never break. It is the golden rule of atmospheric harvesting. When the sun comes up over the horizon, the ambient air temperature begins to rise rapidly. The cold night is over, condensation stops immediately, the physics reverse themselves. Evaporation begins. The atmosphere becomes a sponge again, and it will aggressively try to take its water back. You must collect your water immediately at dawn. Do not wait until you have had your morning coffee. Do not wait until the sun is high in the sky. If you leave your hard-earned water sitting out in an open bucket during the heat of the morning, the solar radiation will heat the plastic and evaporate your life-saving hydration right back into the invisible ocean. You will walk outside at noon and find a completely empty, dry bucket. At first light, you detach the bucket. You pour the harvested water into a sealed, dark, secure container. You store that container in a cool, dark place inside your home, away from sunlight and extreme temperature fluctuations. You replace the collection bucket under the trough, ready for the next night. Most people will look at a cloudless blue sky during a drought and simply wait to die. They will stare at the weather forecast and beg for rain. They will loot grocery stores for thin plastic bottles of commercial water that will run out in a single week. When the bottles are gone, they will fight their neighbors over stagnant mud puddles and polluted drainage ditches. They will die of dysentery and dehydration because they are victims of their own lack of engineering. They rely on a system that was designed to fail. You are not a victim. You understand that the atmosphere is a giant, invisible reservoir containing more fresh water than every river on the planet combined. You do not pray for rain. You force the sky to hand over its moisture. You just built the tap. The grid is going to fail. The municipal pumps are going to stop whining. The people who relied on convenient, store-bought infrastructure are going to perish in environments that are literally saturated with atmospheric moisture. They will suffocate in an ocean they cannot see. You now have the actuarial data. You now have the Moroccan fog harvesting protocol. You know the thermodynamics of the dew point. You know exactly what to do with $12, a hardware store, and a clear understanding of aerodynamic physics. Stop waiting for the rain. Stop trusting the water towers. Build the engine. Stay sharp. Stay prepared. Disclaimer: this video is for educational, documentary, and entertainment purposes only. The atmospheric harvesting methods described are historical and theoretical survival techniques intended for absolute grid-down emergencies. Do not consume untreated or improperly collected water. Consuming contaminated water can lead to severe illness or death. Always rely on modern, professionally treated water sources and consult official guidelines for water purification. The creator assumes no liability for injury or illness resulting from the replication of the systems discussed in this briefing. Situation report. What is the average nighttime humidity in your specific region? Drop your state and your humidity percentage in the comments below so we can assess the atmospheric water potential in your sector. Subscribe to the channel for more raw, unfiltered actuarial data and zero dependency protocols the mainstream survival industry actively refuses to cover. Stay sharp. Stay prepared.